Welcome to the Coffee with Creators podcast, a casual conversation with creators about life and experiences. I'm your friend and your host, Michael. My guest today is Dunna, and he runs a YouTube channel called Dunna Did It, where he shares reviews and tutorials on photography and videography. And while you might think that that's nothing new, Dunna and I actually talk about the importance of adding a bit of what you know to the collective pool of knowledge that is the internet. Also, he's one of the very first YouTubers I started following, so needless to say, I was very excited to finally talk to him face to face. Well, virtually, I mean. I think you'll find his perspective quite insightful, because I know I did. Dunna.
It is Coffee with Creators.
It is Coffee with Creators.
So I made sure I secured the cup.
So I don't know if you know this, but the reason why we called it Coffee with Creators was a lot of people were wondering in the beginning, do you guys talk about coffee? Do I have to have coffee? And the conversation really started between me and my co-host. I don't have a co-host anymore, but my friend Chelsea.
I noticed that. There's only one of you.
So
yeah.
Chelsea's actually moved on with a different aspect of her like creative career. So I'm very excited for her. We had a little meeting before the year ended, and we just both decided that for our own growth, that we should probably just part ways. We're still friends. And I've invited her. I said, when you're free, you can stop by Coffee with Creators. But basically, she doesn't have the time anymore. So yeah. I'm like, oh man, that sucks because I'm not really good with being by myself. But
it happens a lot in this. I think in this field, everybody kind of like we're all creative and we all are constantly wanting new things and like moving in different directions. And especially when you try and have a team like that, it's if you guys are both wanting to go in different directions, then
it can be very challenging. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So where was I going? Oh yeah. Anyway, so the reason why we just called it Coffee Creators was because we figured that what we wanted to do was have this platform where we can just have a conversation and chat over your favorite drink. So that's really the only reason, not necessarily have coffee, but during like early 2020, it's like coffee was like the cool thing. I thought, like that.
It works out really well for this episode, anyway.
Yeah, I know.
My whole audience knows how obsessed with coffee I am.
Actually,
even like my live streams, which I kind of stopped doing, but like I always called them Coffee Break with Dunna Did It.
Oh, really?
And there was like, I had like I had the fancy overlay when I would do the live streams, and there would be the little scrolling thing at the bottom saying like, you don't have to donate, but if you wanna, you can
buy me coffee or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Okay,
if you want to buy me a coffee, then you can. Yeah, and my whole like every episode, or I try and remember to do it every episode, is I always say secure the cup, which is like my little coffee thing, but it leaves it open for people who maybe aren't coffee drinkers.
Oh, interesting. That's a good way of putting it.
Your cup can be full of whatever you want it to be.
Yes,
full.
I like that. That's pretty cool. So how often do you live stream, and where do you live stream on?
I don't right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring it back this year. It's on my list of things that need to come back. But I was doing every other week, and then every other episode, one would be like on a topic, and I would just like ramble for 15 minutes and then answer questions. And then the opposite weeks, I was editing my audience's photos. So like they would, a couple days before, I would put something out on Instagram or whatever and say, hey, here's a Google Drive folder. Go drop a bunch of raw photos in there and I'll edit them on the live stream. And then people would come in and they would add super chats to get their photo moved up to the top. So like, it was a lot of fun, and people have been bugging me about bringing it back, but it just got to the point where I went full-time YouTube last year, and I was like, I'm going to be able to do 3 videos a week and a live stream, and I'll start a podcast and I'll do all this stuff. And then it was like, no. I just got pickier with my 1 video a week, and I don't have any extra time for anything else.
Yeah. So actually, I want to talk about that a little bit. Excuse me for a second. Sorry, my throat's a little dry.
That's all good.
I had to just kind of clear it. I want to talk to you about that, actually. By the way, so I'm just recording right now, and this is kind of like the new direction that I'm taking Coffee with Creators, wherein it's an honest, actual conversation. It doesn't have to be anything specific, and I don't, because usually in the past I would have to do like this big intro, like, welcome to the Coffee Creators, here's my guest, blah blah blah. So I'm doing something a little bit different here, which I think makes it a little bit more approachable for people, because now they can kind of just sit here and listen to us just talk. And I treat it as if like this, basically, I'm meeting you for the first time. And this is actually very exciting for me, Dunna, because I've been following you, I think, if I remember correctly, since 2016, because that was about the same time my daughter was born. And I remember that because I might have actually followed you first. No way.
Because I was looking for desk stuff. I was getting my desk together, and I was getting, I followed Artifox and all the like fancy minimalist desk setup kind of things, and I came across yours, and I think you were the one who introduced me to GroveMade.
Yes.
And now my desk is just like, I actually have a desk tour video coming out in the next couple of weeks here, and my desk is just littered with GroveMade stuff. Like, you can't even. I have one of those autonomous stand sit desks. And like, you can't even see it. I make a joke about that in the video. I'm like, it's hard to tell with all the GroveMade stuff on it, but I have the bamboo desk,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I might actually followed you first.
That's crazy.
But yeah.
But you know what though? I think I might have followed you way before that though, because I remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you had a video back then, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember a video. This one specifically, because this was when I didn't even own a mirrorless camera then. So I had a big DSLR, and you were teaching in this video how to do transitions. And
that's the big one.
Was it the big one?
On my channel. Yeah, for probably a year or two there, that was the one. It was a really slow start too. Like, I put it out and it kind of didn't do much. And then like 6 months later, all of a sudden it was just like crazy, and now it's pretty close, I think, to 1 million. I think it'll be the first one on my channel to get 1 million.
Oh, no way.
Views.
That's cool.
Yeah, pretty close, I think. Anyway, I haven't quite checked in a while. I try not to
to obsess over
bother myself with that too much, or I'll obsess over it. But
it's hard, right? Like, how do you feel about that? Like, trying, because you are obviously a full-time YouTuber, and I always follow a lot of these accounts that I admire, but a lot of them also kind of obsess about the numbers, and it, to be frank, it kind of takes the fun out of it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, I'm creating not so I can, obviously there's a goal, right? I want to reach a certain number, but now all they talk about is click rate, retention, which is cool. It's definitely important. But how do you feel about that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and it really depends on what kind of creative you are. Like, I like to say I'm like 80% technical and 20% creative. Whereas I think there are a lot of people who are the other way around, who are like really heavy on the creative and like maybe don't even know all the like technical aspects that or know how to talk about them or anything like that. Like, they might just do it instinctively or whatever. But like, for me, it's quite the other way around, where I love the learning and the techniques behind it and all the gear stuff and the specs and that kind of stuff. And that kind of goes for YouTube too, where like I do get a little bit obsessed over the analytics and the numbers and that kind of stuff. And I kind of play it like a game a little bit. Like, I watch that stuff, but it really is a mindset that you have to come at it with, like, okay, I'm going to look at my numbers and then I'm going to use them, and whether that's positive or negative, I'm going to use that information. But I do think that some people kind of obsess in it in a more emotional way. And I've been reasonably good at not doing that. Okay. And I think that that's really the key to be able to take a look at that. I think it's, similar to the way that like people would follow like their portfolio, their financial portfolio kind of thing. It's like, you keep an eye on it. You generally kind of know the direction things are going. You take account of any kind of like big events that might happen in it, and you adjust accordingly. Well, this is my financial portfolio. This is the way that I make my living now as of the start of 2021. So I kind of like look at it the same way. Okay. The nice thing about it is that the core of it, and one of the reasons why I got into YouTube is because I get to choose what I do. And as long as I can assume that there are enough people out there like me, I can basically make what I would like, and there should be enough people to watch. And that, I mean, that comes with a huge, huge friggin' Mount Everest size pile of privilege, to be able to say and do that. So I fully acknowledge that, but that's kind of been my personal strategy.
That's actually, you brought up a couple of good points, like to treat it like a game. That kind of helps it for me. So maybe I'm speaking from a little bit more of how I feel about it, and you are correct. Some people get too attached emotionally, I think, and I am probably one of those who, if I look at the numbers too much, I get affected. And so I try not to think about it. And so maybe that's why I get so affected when I see a lot of people talk about the analytics too much, because I feel like it takes the fun out of it. But that's just me. I don't think it's wrong. You're right, though. I think it has a lot to do with what type of creator you are, or creative. And now that you mentioned that, if you treat it like an actual, obviously like a portfolio, just because it is your means of making money, I think it's only wise to do that. So I do spend some time looking at my analytics, but I feel like I need to not obsess, but I need to educate myself a little bit more with how it actually works and what I can do to bump up those numbers, right? So that's a good point. The other thing I want to touch on is what you actually said, and you said that you feel like you recognize the fact that you are in a position that a lot of people don't have access to, right? Like this, to that I say that I've seen you build your brand, your channel ever since, for when you were a much, much smaller channel. And I appreciate your, I guess, modesty. I don't know if that's the right word, but you just sound so modest. And it's almost like you don't see how much you've created for the community that you basically built around you. And I guess for that, I just wanted to commend you. And I feel like everything that you've done, you deserve it. So I just wanted to say that, because talking again about that video, the transition video, I don't know, well, you don't know this obviously, but that was a very influential video for me when I started my creative journey. So I've always been a creative type, but I never felt like I was good enough. So I was very shy to share any photos or any creation. The only thing that I really did was drew. I drew a lot when I was a kid, and those are the only ones that my parents, my peers, my friends would kind of admire and say, "Oh, you're really good at that." But anything else, I didn't have the confidence. Like when I wanted to try photography, I was just like, I'm not good enough. So I would take pictures, but never really share them. I wanted to try to take videos, but I had no idea where to start. And that's when your video came in. And I remember this. I was watching that video, and you were showing how to do like these different transitions, and it kind of blew my mind. I'm like, you can do that? It's very pivotal, I guess, for me, because I feel like it made the whole prospect of learning to use video creatively became a little bit more approachable for me. So I wanted to thank you for that. That's why having you as a guest is actually very important for me. You were a part of that. Man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think you nailed it right at the end there. You said the word approachable, and that's kind of like, I don't know, like, companies have like a mission statement and all that kind of stuff. I think my channel, that's a word that I really try and keep in mind all the time, is the word approachable. I really want, and I think successfully, based on what you're saying, have made it so that it feels like a conversation between two people who are learning together almost, like I've never really hidden the fact that I'm really only a step or two ahead of the people watching my videos. I've never said like, hey, I'm the biggest, most professional photographer, videographer. With that video, I was like, hey, I'm a dude in my living room here, and I'm going to show you how to do this crazy trick that I just figured out.
Yeah.
By filming my plants and my books and whipping the camera all over the place, and here's where you cut and here's how you do it, kind of thing. Like, it's really that like one step ahead kind of thing. I learn something cool and then I'm like, hey world, come check this out with me. Mm-hmm. And that I think that makes it approachable. And then I think the my communication style is something that people have also told me that kind of I think lends into that. I am a technical brain, but it's like somewhere between Gerald Undone and Peter McKinnon kind of thing.
That's
where
a good mix.
it's I've had a couple of comments that were like, this guy is like Gerald Undone and Peter McKinnon had a baby.
It's like the middle ground.
And it's like it's the middle ground. So it's like technical enough where you can like learn from it, but it also kind of feels, not unlike this, where it's just like a chat between folks. And so that's something that I keep in mind as I'm like writing scripts and coming up with video ideas and that kind of stuff. Is like, okay, like cool if this is going to bring value to my audience, but also is it approachable? Does it feel personable? Like that kind of stuff. Yeah. So thanks for pointing that out and for letting me know that that's been working.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, just look at it this way. I am just one of, I'm sure this may sound crazy, but I'm sure I'm just one of millions of people. I know that sounds crazy, right? But I'm sure I'm just one of millions of people who your content, your personality has somehow affected, our lives in some positive way. I really believe in that. So it's one of those things that I think creators in general take for granted, just because maybe it's just most of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us. I'm not going to try to lump you in because and just in case you're not a part of this, but we feel there's always that imposter syndrome. And that's a very popular term that goes around in the community, right? Like imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Like I'm not as good as this and that. And so why would my work matter? But to that, I always say it doesn't matter whether you're better than this person or not. What matters is you are being you. And Dunna, I think you are very good at showing, you're bringing your personality forward. And that personality is what attracts people like myself, for example, to your content. It's like you're a friend. And isn't that what we all want anyway? To have friends, to have more people like us and share the same things that we like. And then we become a community. I think that's the perfect society for us, right? For creatives. But to that point, I'm curious now, do you also experience some sort of imposter syndrome at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Pretty regularly.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially I think throughout 2021 when I was trying to go from my having a full-time job and this being the side hustle. And then I flipped them around. So this was the full-time job and my other job as an audio engineer I went part-time there and kind of very gradually finished all my projects and got so busy with YouTube that I haven't done a lot of that in a while. And during that process, that there were a couple of points there where there was a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of like, it's not even so much like, am I good enough or that kind of stuff. It's like, can I make this work? Is this actually viable? I'm very careful with the things that I jump all the way into. I'll dip a toe in and I'll see how things go. And even like the YouTube thing, like I had been going for 4 or so years and like kind of gradually shifting as things felt like I could build them in this direction. And then I got to shift over to this way and pivot a little bit here and there. And so I'm like just gradually dipping my toe in with like really very little, on the line, if you will. And then kind of gradually dove in. And that was the point, I think, where there was a lot of, okay, everything's out there now. I'm actually relying on this. And then you start to have the thoughts like, is this a mistake? Am I going to actually be able to make this happen? Do I actually know as much as I think I know? Or is this that thing when you first start something new and you think you're way better than you are, and then you get a reality check afterward? There's lots of interesting videos on that. There's like a curve. I forget what it's called, but it's like this funny point where you think you're really great and then you get a reality check afterwards and you start learning and you realize how much you don't know. And so there's always that worry in the back of my mind is like, am I actually at that point? I thought I passed that and that I was actually just like learning now, but like, am I there? So that kind of stuff. And then of course, like you see other people having successes that, you feel like maybe could have been your successes or something like that. And it's, we're all humans. So we all do that thing where we're like, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
That I'm not getting those same opportunities, or like, how are they doing things different? And what can I take from that? And luckily, like I said before, I play this like a game a little bit. And so then I see that and have been able to reasonably take it as information rather than get emotional about it. To some extent, right. I am still human. I am not fully robot.
Yes. That's a good thing. I mean, to some, they might think that's a fault, but no, that's what makes being human beautiful, right? Like, that's what's that I think personally, knowing that we are not perfect is what makes life a lot more interesting. Frankly, I think that's also what helps us progress, because you remember you were talking about that curve, and imagine if we always thought that we were just the thing, right? Like the perfect one. Then there's really no room for growth. I mean, the only time you grow is when you get when you find yourself on the floor and you're like, oh, that was a reality check. And I think that's a process that happens throughout your entire life, especially in the creative field, right? And a lot of these things, sometimes they just happen in our heads. And piggybacking on what you just said about finding other people, or maybe friends that you've seen kind of like blow up, or they're experiencing some sort of success, and you feel that that could have been me. That's actually one thing I kind of want to talk about for a little bit, just because I feel like it's a topic that we ignore just because we feel like it's maybe not good, but I think it's perfectly normal. Do you think? I mean, that's perfectly normal and so I appreciate you actually bringing that up and saying that out loud, because it's one of those things that I feel, but it's not necessarily bad. I don't wish ill, I don't wish that they fail or anything. It's just, it's a feeling that it's very uncomfortable, but I use that to push forward, right? Is that kind of what you did to get yourself out of like these ruts, if that's what you call it?
Yeah. I try my best to like take that, like I said, and use it as information and not as like an emotional cue kind of thing. Like, or if I'm going to feel emotional about it in some way, shape, or form, if I'm going to feel sad that I'm not getting the opportunities that I feel like I should be getting, or something along those lines, or sad that I missed out on an opportunity somehow or whatever, then like, okay, like let's feel sad for a bit, and then let's use that as information to get better and try and seize the next opportunity, try and like catch that in the moment next time something like that comes up, see what the circumstances were, and see if we can identify those the next time. But yeah, it is like kind of like, there are lots of weird like taboo things that people don't like to talk about. Like emotions are definitely one of them. Money's another one where it's like, we've all been taught not to talk about how much money we make and stuff like that. Right. And depending on who you're talking to, like there's lots of people who will tell you that that's like part of the system kind of thing, where they like, the people with money told us not to talk with our peers about how much money we make so that we can't bargain for a higher paycheck, basically. And I think that seeped into a lot of other parts in our society as well. And I think the same thing goes for things like emotions or strategies and that kind of stuff. And I think it's, personally, I'm coming out of this. I'm trying to unlearn that and talk a little bit more about, the feelings that go along with it and the strategies that go along with it, and trying to be, in cases like this where we're having this conversation, be as open about it as possible. And yeah, I think that how you react to your struggles and how you react to your emotions around these things and how you react to the information that you're taking in is really such an important thing in life in general, but like in my case as a creator and as someone who's trying to build a business out of this, and build a living based around it kind of thing. I think that that's really important. If I was to look at, some of my friends and peers who have similar channels or whatever, and see that they're getting growth that I'm not. And like, of course that's like a bummer, but like you said, it's like, first of all, I never think badly of them or anything like that, or get upset with them. Like, I'm super stoked that anyone can grow anything in this kind of space. That's awesome to me. And then, you just try and react in a way that is going to allow you to then, like I said, kind of seize the next opportunity that comes along, or, if borrow some things that they're doing, if it's working for them and you think that you could, implement it, it doesn't mean that opportunity is gone. I mean, unless it's something really, really specific where it would be like,
only this
obviously,
person can
like,
do it.
Yeah. Like, if Becky and Chris, made wall hooks, if all of a sudden I was like, wall hooks sound like a really great idea, I think it would be pretty obvious that I stole that. But
or it's like,
like if
it's, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
okay.
reminded of this old, very old, I was still a kid. Remember David Copperfield, the magician? He made the Statue of Liberty disappear. There's a long time ago, and I'm like, it's like suddenly showing up on YouTube and saying, I'm going to make the Statue of Liberty disappear. Yeah, obviously you can't claim that as your own. But sorry, go on. I had to get that out of my head.
No, that's a great example. Like, that's something that, like, you could probably do that if you were honest about, like, the fact that you were like paying homage to David Copperfield, or whatever. But like, if you did it and said like, this is something fancy and new, then that might be going too far. But if it's like general things, like, something that's a little bit more generic about like, oh, this person started asking people to subscribe at the start of their videos, and they seem to be getting more subscribers. If you take that information and you're like, okay, well, like, I'm not really stealing anything if I do that. Like, some people say subscribe at the end, some people say subscribe at the start. Let's try it for a while and see if it works on my channel. Those kinds of things. It's like, instead of like looking at other people's progress and just being bummed that you're not getting it, like, look at other people's progress, and if there's something to learn from it, try and kind of react in that way. I think how we react to our situations says a lot about us as people and allows us to do a lot of growth as people.
Yes, that's absolutely true. You actually said that in the beginning, or just a few minutes earlier. You said that you allow yourself to kind of process it, right? Like, to feel sad a little bit, because I think recognizing that feeling is also important, because I also grew up in an environment where certain feelings are wrong and you suppress them. And then you grow up, you're like, I don't know what to do. I can't process this because this is wrong. It's not. It's like, you're acknowledging that. You're acknowledging the feeling of being sad, feeling left out, feeling whatever it is. It's okay. But the important thing, I think the most crucial part, is what you said, is what you do after that, right? And in your case, that was just perfect. You learn from it. Like, for example, like these techniques, these are best practices that you can apply to your stuff. And that's how you grow. And that's, again, going back to, like, it's awesome being not perfect, because you have the capacity to grow if you're like that, if you recognize that. So I think, Don, you said that you were kind of unlearning all these things. You and I are on the same path. I'm unlearning a lot of things that I've learned throughout my life. And I feel very vulnerable in this sense. And so I appreciate you sharing that here in the podcast. But I think it's also an important step. It's an important step. It's part of the growth. And just want to say, you're not alone. I'm also here with you.
Thank you.
Actually,
I think there's a lot of unlearning happening in society nowadays, with the lights being turned on in a lot of places.
Time for a quick break, but when we come back, we discuss the importance of sharing content in your own style and how the outdoors inspire Dunna's photography. We'll be right back. Working from home definitely has its perks. One of them being is that I don't have to sit in a lifeless, boring cubicle. I know for a fact that a little inspiration can really liven up my workday, so I've become intentional with the things I surround myself with. But inspiring doesn't have to only mean nice to look at, because they can be functional as well. So I'm urging you to check out GroveMade's beautiful collection of desk accessories, from their precision machined aluminum pens to their beautifully crafted laptop docks. You can find something that will organize your desk and inspire your work. I personally have a handful of their products in my office, and I really love them. The design and craftsmanship make each piece feel special, and that's because GroveMade wants you to build your dream workspace so you can get your best work done. Visit grovemade.com and save 10% on your first purchase by using the promo code Michael10 at checkout. That's MICHAEL10 to save 10% on your first purchase. It reminded me of this conversation that I had with a friend before. And I remember telling him or asking him how come he doesn't want to start his own social media channel where he can teach something or show something. And his reply was, well, I'm not the first one. Someone already did it, right? Someone already did it. And our conversation earlier reminded me of that conversation. And to me, my reply back then was, maybe you can do something better. But nowadays, it's not really about doing something better. It's about doing it your own way. So I define it in a very different way. How do you feel about it, about something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things out there about learning styles and that kind of stuff. And regardless of kind of what you believe about we've got auditory or kinetic or whatever the different kinds of learning styles, everybody takes in information in a slightly different way. And I learned this firsthand when I went to college. Straight out of high school, I moved to Ontario, which is where Toronto is, for those of you listening that don't know Canada very well. So I went to Ontario, and I went to school out there. And after my first year, that school, it's this like private college for audio engineering, they hire back 3 of the like top students. They hire them to be essentially kind of like teacher's assistants and to teach the practical time. So from like 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. there are like classes, and then from 3 p.m. till 11 p.m. there's like these practical labs. They have all these recording studios, and some of them are like taught. So I was basically teaching lessons. And I learned that firsthand because you get a group of 4 people in front of you, and each of those 4 people might learn in a completely different way. So you have to, explain it once in the way that you think makes the most sense. And then you look at one of those 4 people and they're looking at you like, I don't understand a damn word you just said. And so then you have to be like, okay, how can I rephrase this in a way that person is going to understand? And then those 4 people, after you've spent whatever, an hour and a half teaching them this and rephrasing it and that kind of stuff, 4 more people walk in and you have to redo the whole thing over and over again. There were 60 people in the school. So if you imagine that, if there are, let's say, 5 or 6 different languages kind of thing that you have to speak to people. And so if you imagine that on YouTube, now I only am going to make one video about the thing, and I'm going to speak in the way that I would learn. And hopefully there are enough people out there that would understand that. So especially in education YouTube, if there are 700-800 videos on the same topic, if they're all explained in a slightly different way, slightly different information, not only could you be just like working with a different kind of audience that might learn in a slightly different way. But if, first of all, like for me, if I go and watch one video on it and then I go and watch another one, I might be filling in some gaps that I missed on the first one, or certain things that maybe I didn't understand that I understood better from the second person. So I think kind of doubling up on information is totally fine. And I think anyone that is worried about not being the first one, especially again in the kind of like education sector, not being the first one to teach that topic or to go over that thing, I think that is pretty much a moot point.
Yeah.
That would be like saying there can only be one textbook on biology. Like that's it.
Right.
And then any other textbook like should just not exist because there's already one.
Right.
You know, like that's not the way that we as humans learn, and it's not the way that definitely not the way that YouTube works. Like I almost never go and watch one video to learn a topic.
That's very true.
I go and watch one video and then I watch a follow-up video to make sure that I believe the first person, and then I watch a third video to see if it confirms the first and second, you know, like especially like in reviews and stuff like that. Like you can have a bunch of different reviews and then you cherry pick the bits and pieces that you feel like apply to you. So I still think there's so much room for people on the internet.
Absolutely.
You know, to be making content and sharing their opinions and that kind of stuff.
Yes,
so.
I agree. I fully agree with you on that one, because it's so, I don't think I've ever heard it expressed in the way you express it, like so clearly, as to why it's important for people to put their content out there, not because they're going to be the first or the only ones, but because they're adding knowledge to this whole big, I don't know, I guess, basket of, you know, this encyclopedia, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways of teaching one thing. And to me, I mean, the way I even think about it is that some people just like to hear, like, okay, a better example would be, I had a high school teacher that no matter what I did, his voice puts me to sleep. Like no matter what I did. But for some reason, like he could be talking about the same exact topic as another teacher, and just hearing his voice puts me to sleep. I don't know. I can't explain it, but the point is, we receive all these external input, I guess, and you know, in different ways. So a story that I remember of someone saying that her husband was trying to teach or show her ways of how to improve her health, basically. And for years, because I think her husband was a fitness trainer or something like that. And for years, she never really listened to him. And one day she bumps into an old friend of hers that she hasn't seen in 10 years or so. And then she brings up this whole topic to her friend, and her friend goes, oh, you know what you should do? You should just do this. And so she did that, goes back to her husband, and she goes, hey, you know what? I did what this person said, and it actually worked. And her husband goes, I've been telling you the same thing for the last 10 years, and you never listened. So the lesson there was that we just take in information differently from different people. So going on what you just said, Dunna, I think you just said it perfectly, honestly. People just learn in different ways. And so you kind of have to adjust it. And so for those who haven't started their own channels or their own content just because they're afraid that they're not the first one, that doesn't matter at all. You're just adding to the pool of knowledge. And what Dunna just said is absolutely perfect. It just makes sense to me. And I think that in itself, to be honest with you, I think that in itself is a skill. The communication skills required to kind of change the way you speak or deliver information, that in itself, I think, is a talent that you have. I obviously
well, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I poke around my old videos every once in a while, and it's definitely something that I've developed.
Okay.
I mean, not that I think I was like a bad communicator necessarily to start off with, but it's definitely something that I have spent time and energy and effort improving. And I do a lot more script writing now because I'm kind of editing that communication as I go, you know, whereas like I think when I first started, I liked people whose videos felt very off the cuff. And so then I thought they must be just off the cuff. And I didn't realize that you can be specific and communicate in a very specific way and still feel off the cuff by the way that you present yourself and that kind of stuff. So it is something that is learnable. Okay. And I think that's something that people are worried about too, is like maybe they don't have the easiest time speaking or getting their thoughts across and that kind of stuff. And it's something that you can practice. It's the reason why Toastmasters exists and whatever, like those things that teach public speaking and that kind of stuff. It's like, it is something that you can practice. It is something that you can get better at. But it's not going to happen until you start practicing.
Right.
You know, think of it like learning an instrument or something like that. It's something that you do a bunch, and I always suggest to people to, if you are going to start a channel or start, producing media for online and specifically video, it's like, make a bunch of practice videos. Why do people think that the first thing they make, they have to publish? Like, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as if you buy a piano and you start taking lessons, you learn Mary Had a Little Lamb, you don't like book the local concert hall and like, take it on the road kind of thing. Like you practice a bunch and you maybe years before you ever, do your first concert. You want to make sure that you're building up those skills first. So you can treat, online video and content creation kind of the same way. Do some practicing. You don't have to publish everything that you make. If it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, you can just bank it, learn from it, and or do it again or whatever. I think that that's something that a lot of great creators do that they don't necessarily talk about.
Yes.
And because our online lives are this like curated, perfect thing, mm-hmm. we as content consumers assume that was like their first try. One take, everything, all just like super easy, happened in an afternoon kind of thing. It's like, I take like 3 days to like write, shoot, reshoot, edit, reshoot again, edit some more, add titles, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it takes me a long time to put together a video. And I think that because the video is only 12 minutes long, people are like, oh, he probably just whips that together, but there's a lot that goes behind it, and there's a lot that gets left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. I'm sure you've also come across conversations like this. I was at a party recently, maybe a few months ago. And I saw an acquaintance there, and he's a little bit older, and he asked me what I do nowadays since the pandemic. And I said, I work from home. And first thing he goes, oh, you're so lucky. I'm like, sure. Yeah, I am so lucky, but I get to spend time with my kids, and, I get to stay home. But obviously there's a lot of like things that go around in the background that I didn't want to have to explain to him. And then he further kind of pokes around and asks, he said, what else do you do other than graphic design? I said, I have an Instagram account. I have a YouTube account. And so we kind of got into that topic. I try to avoid talking about that with people who don't know me, just because I don't want to have to keep explaining to them. But it's a big question mark for a lot of people. Yeah. And the funny thing is, even after that conversation, it was still a big question mark, because the first thing he said, as soon as he found out that I also have a YouTube channel, he's like, oh, you're so lucky. You get free products. That's awesome. Like, that's what we all want. I'm like, no, I want to get paid. That's what I want. Yeah. I want to be doing something that I love, that I can sustain, and also get paid for. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't wrap his head around that. And to him, I was just lucky that I'm able to do that. But to him, it's luck. But to me, it's practice and a lot of frustration. Like you were just saying, like the background is that you are going through all these stuff in your head, and you're actually buying equipment, testing them out. A lot of trial and errors, a lot of pain, actually, to finally get a 10 or even 8 minutes of video out there. And it's not going to be perfect. You'll still get the haters, and they'll say, well, you didn't talk about this, or this sucks, or this is terrible. Obviously, that's a different topic, but they didn't know how much it took for me to get to that point, and for me to try to keep doing that on a weekly basis. That's very, very, it's very challenging. So for him to say, I'm lucky, yes, I am lucky in a lot of regard, but it's not easy. It wasn't easy to get there. And this conversation just reminded me of this other person that I follow. I'm sure, do you know Jerry Riggs Everything, that channel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I follow him on Twitter, and I saw, I think he posted like a clip of his video, and some guy commented, and he goes, look at this guy. He's getting paid to do something, like something simple or whatever, or, whatever. And he goes, this is so depressing. And then he replies, he's like, you just don't see what happens in the background. I've been doing this for years. And if you want to get to this point, all you got to do is just start doing it. And so I like how he approached it in a very constructive way. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. I think a lot of people need to realize that we content creators don't get here just because we were chosen by the gods and, plop down here in a golden throne. No, it's not that. It's a lot of work. It's just like any job. You want to work your way up, you have to work your way up. But sorry, I kind of got off a tangent there. It just reminded me of that. But I want to switch gears a little bit, Dunna, if you don't mind. I want to talk about more about photography, your love for photography, and how it all started. Let's go back there first. Like, how did you get into photography?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started. So I guess a little bit of background. I'm a music producer and audio engineer. I'm part owner of a recording studio and music school here in Edmonton. I ran our studio, our recording studio. I made music. That was my full-time job. And basically what started to happen is it was a new business, and when you're a new business, you take everybody who walks through the door, who's willing to put cash on the table to do the job. So as much as it was a creative thing, and I got to be creative, and some of the projects I really loved, in the end, I was still making something for somebody else. So if you're an artist and you come into my studio, I'm making music for you. You have the final say on whether you like that snare drum or you don't, and I have to change it if that's what you tell me to do, because you're the one paying my bills, basically. Mm-hmm. And so then I still really loved music, but what I was looking for was a creative outlet separate from that, because at the end of a 8 or 10 or 12-hour day at the studio, the last thing I wanted to do was make my own music, was keep choosing sounds and coming up with creative ideas for that. And so then I started to fiddle around literally with the editing options in the Instagram app. So I would, instead of just like taking a photo and then uploading it onto my Instagram of whatever it was at the time, my coffee or my breakfast or something like that, I would take the photo and then I would go into the little editing options and play with contrast and clarity and all that kind of stuff, and started to get kind of fascinated with like, what can I do with this? And then it was like, what are the limits of this? And like, what if I had a better camera? And like, can I, and then you're like, oh, like I'm limited by my terrible composition. So now I got to learn composition. And like, it kind of blossomed into just like, out of like curiosity kind of thing, like what makes good photography versus bad photography. And like, I'm a lifelong learner. So I think that's kind of where it all stemmed from. And then my wife and I were going down to Mexico for Christmas. My folks have a place down there that they spend most of their time at now. And we were going down to visit them and spend Christmas. And I was like, it would be cool if I had a camera. And so then I picked up my first camera and like took that down and tried to do my best taking photos in Mexico. None of which I think ever really got put anywhere because they were bad. And I didn't know that you could get like dust on a camera sensor. It was like a Sony A5100 or something like that. So it was like, I was just like changing lenses on the beach with like sand going everywhere.
It's giving me anxiety.
And yeah. The funny thing is that I bought the camera at Best Buy, and when I got home, I didn't even know what the problem was. I didn't know why I was getting these weird spots. So I just took it back to Best Buy and I was like, there's something wrong with your camera. Give me a new one. And they just did. So I ended up with an A6000 there because like, the people at Best Buy, at that specific Best Buy, didn't actually know anything about cameras. They're just like some teenager trying to get his weekend money kind of thing. And so, but yeah, that was really kind of the spark of it. It's really curiosity driven. And like I said, I'm 80% technical. So I learn techniques and I learn how to do new things, and I get obsessed with kind of perfecting the knowledge behind it. Yeah. And then I translate that into creativity. And then more recently, probably within the last 3 or 4 years, my wife suggested that we go hiking. And I was just like, that sounds dumb. That absolutely sounds like the worst idea ever. Like, why would anyone want to just... and this themselves. Is funny to anyone who's watched my content recently. This is probably really funny. but basically I was like, okay, like let's try this thing, and go hiking. And I just absolutely fell in love with hiking and adventuring in nature. And specifically around here, I'm kind of 4 hours from the Canadian Rocky Mountains in two different directions. And so starting to kind of take advantage of that a little bit more, and then combine them, the photography and the adventure of getting to the destination, yes. Like you feel that photo is extra special because not anybody can just go there. If you're at the top of a mountain and you've got this view that only a select percentage of the human race has ever seen in person. It's not, Times Square where you can just like grab a flight, take a taxi and you're there, kind of thing. It's like this extra special place. And you had the added benefit of the fun and exercise and that kind of stuff along the way. So it really is this kind of like encompassing experience for me. It's really not just about the photo itself. That is a lot of fun, and I enjoy the technical side and the creative side of that, and editing as well. But like, it really is this like adventure to create photography, which is really, really cool.
You described it the way how I would approach things, like out of curiosity. Like I was a kid, when I was a kid, I would go exploring, not because I had to, just because I was curious. You know what I mean? I would try new things just because I was curious. But somewhere along the lines of like growing up from, being a kid to an adult, somehow, somewhere, being curious and trying to go for the things that you like, somehow, I don't know, for some weird reason in my head, it was wrong, or it wasn't the right thing, or it was too childish, or it was, but then later on, I'm again unlearning these things. It's okay to go for those passions. It's okay because that's what makes you you. And when you told me that story, it's just like, it's like my story. But you know what's hilarious though, that your story about Best Buy, and I'm like, did we go to the same Best Buy? Because the reason I ended up with my first mirrorless camera was kind of like that. I bought a point and shoot Canon G7X. And
the classic.
Yeah, I still have that camera to this day. I still want to have that camera. The reason why I don't have it is because my daughter dropped it and it broke. I'm like, oh great. I brought it back to Best Buy, and they said, we don't have this in stock anymore. We have the Mark II, but we can't give you the Mark II. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, but we can instead is reimburse you the full amount. And I'm like, oh. So and mind you, I've used this camera for more than a year. And then they're like, we'll just give you the money back. I'm like, okay. And then that's when I bought my first Sony, the Sony a6300. And I've used that camera so much, and that's how I kind of got into photography again. I took photos for the fun of it. I never really shared it, but that's how I got the camera. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, and your point of having that satisfaction of taking that photo from a very unique perspective, I think not only is that the reason why it's so satisfying, it's also because of the amount of work to get there. The pressures that you felt, like the little challenges that you to put yourself through to get to the point, and you can snap this photo. It just makes the reward much more rewarding. And also the way you explained it, when you said hiking, I started laughing because hiking to me sounds like a terrible idea. But you know what's funny? Reword it, just say, like, if my wife used to go hiking a lot. Like she would always invite me to go jogging or hiking, things that I don't like doing. But she's like, let's go hiking. And I'm like, you know what's funny is that if you just change that word from hiking to exploring or maybe adventuring, somehow in my kid brain, that sounds awesome. So when you were telling that story, I went back there, and you were telling me about going to the Rockies and just exploring. I felt like I was there and snapping that photo, and I'm like, this is why this guy's awesome. I love the fact that you have that heart, that creative heart, that curiosity, because I think at the core of things, we need to be curious. If you want to get better, if you want to learn about something, and especially you're very, very technical, it's kind of like what you do when you're producing music. You're basically taking a bunch of these technical things to create something new, right?
Yeah.
And it just that curiosity alone, I think it's such an important thing that we forget. Like especially me, I forget when I pick up my camera. Sometimes I pick up my camera because I feel like I need to shoot for people. No.
Yep.
You have to have that curiosity. Okay, what is it going to look like in this light? What is it going to look like through this lens? When you approach things from that angle, it becomes a lot more enjoyable, and the results might actually just kind of surprise you. So Dunna, I just wanted to commend you. I love that story. I really did.
You got me blushing. It's my I don't know if you can see it under my beard, but thank you.
No, absolutely great.
But yeah,
story.
it's funny, and it like comes in waves too. That curiosity versus, like you said, like sometimes you feel like you pick up the camera because you kind of have to, like it's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And so like it really does come in waves. And going back to, earlier in the conversation, if you can take that situation where you're like, I should probably shoot something because I need to like post or whatever, so that people know that I'm still alive. If you can have that feeling in mind and then have the feeling of like when it felt really good in mind, and then learn from those situations and try to do your best to like harness that creativity when it does come. Or the curiosity. I love that we keep thinking of it as curiosity and not so much of creativity. Yes. Because again, for me, like I'm a much more technical person than I am a creative person. All my creativity comes out of problem solving from a kind of a technical standpoint. And so, harnessing that curiosity is something that I think again can be kind of learned. And I think that the greatest artists in the world are the ones who have learned how to truly harness their skills and their curiosity and their creativity when the time is right, or they can kind of like they have tools that allow them to kind of make that happen. Someone like Stephen King, who can write a book in a week. That's insane. Or I don't know if that's exactly how long it takes him, but he seems to just like.
Be surprised though. I mean, that guy's so good.
He just puts out so much stuff. Yeah, and his whole thing is like just shut up and write, like that's what you're supposed to do. I think he has a tool set that allows him to do that.
It's insane.
To really like harness that creativity and that curiosity and stuff. Whereas I think some people, it takes a lot longer for them to get there, and maybe in the end their product is just as good, but if they could learn somehow to harness it, they could put out even more. And it feels good to create something that you're proud of. So I want to harness that as much as possible for selfish reasons, because it feels good. You know, if I can make it feel good more often, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's very important too, because I think the better we feel, the better the content becomes, like the output becomes, right? Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Stephen King. I'm actually listening to his audiobook, Billy Summers. I don't know if you listened to it or if you read it. No. So it's really good. Okay. But it's very interesting that you mentioned that Stephen King and how he has like this process of writing, but because the character in his book is he does something as his day job. Let's just call it a day job. And he's pretending to be a writer. But at heart, this guy actually loves writing. And so while I'm reading this or I'm listening to the audiobook, I almost feel like I'm diving into Stephen King's actual life as a writer. Because he describes just locking himself up in the room and start writing. And then he'll basically erase an entire chapter because the voice didn't sound right. So he actually gets so deep into it. I'm like, I wonder if this is how this guy actually writes. It's really interesting. I recommend that book. I'm not finished yet, but I really enjoy it.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to point something out. You said that you feel like you're not a creative person. You're more of a curious person than a creative person. I get that. But to that, I also say that I think creativity is really just taking a bunch of many, many different parts and putting it and making something out of it. And you can approach it with a curious mind or a not so curious mind, but the output, regardless, that's what's creative. The fact that you created something. So I don't know, Dunna. I feel like you're very creative. You're just. I don't know. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit.
I think of it like it's like I'm not creative in the way that people expect it to be. Like people think that creative people like go to sleep and they have all these vivid dreams and they know exactly what amazing piece of art needs to be made. Like someone, their inner voice told them what needed to happen. And so then I always talk about it where I'm like I said, it's like 80% technical, 20% creative, because like I take that technical side and I manufacture creativity out of it. So it's not that I don't have the creativity, but it all comes from this technical curiosity and problem solving.
Okay.
It's like, basically I'm like, I want to create this thing using this technique that seems like it would be fun to do. And then I have to be creative to get to the end. So I definitely feel like I do have creativity, but like there are people out there who start, it's the other way around.
Okay.
They start with this big idea, and that's what I think we typically think of as a creative person, is like they start with a big idea and then they have to then learn the technical to kind of get there.
I see. Okay.
Whereas I like start with the technical and then have to like harness my creativity to like make it something fun or to solve that problem, kind of thing.
So interesting. I've never heard of it expressed in that way. That's actually a very different way of looking at things. And I think I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day. It's really interesting. Yeah, I get it now. I get what you're trying to say. Wow. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think like in the end I get to the same place as the other people that do what I do, kind of thing, but the way that it's approached I think is a little bit different.
Right.
I always thought anyway. I mean, not that I have any kind of like special insight to everybody's creative process or inner workings, but it always felt a little bit different when I heard other people talk about their creative process, where they just like got like a burst of inspiration and all of a sudden had to like, go out and make this creative piece of art that it just popped into their mind, or they dreamt about it or something like that. It's like, it almost never happens like that for me.
No,
it's like I sit down and I'm like, I have this thing that I think I want to do. What does that look like? Like, let's hash this out. Let's use all these tools and techniques that I have to figure out what that could look like. And along the way, I'm like auditing and making sure I'm like, is this still a good idea? Is this still on track to where I was hoping it would go? That kind of thing. But it never feels like what, the great artists talk about, where they have this crazy burst of inspiration,
or they heard it from
like
the
that.
wind. I think I read like a poet say that before. She said something like she literally heard it from the wind, and I'm like, am I missing something?
That's amazing. Like I don't want to. I also don't want to like take that away from anybody. If that's the way that it works for you, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually jealous.
Somewhat jealous that like you can just have the wind tell you what your next big idea is, and then just like if you have the willpower and the skill to harness the techniques. That sounds refreshing. I might not want it like that all the time, but like even just, maybe I got to spend some more time with the wind, and we need to become friends.
You and I both need to do that. All right, Dunna. Well, we're at the end of the podcast, and I would love to have you here for the rest of like the next hour, but obviously that's not going to happen. Before we end this podcast, I'm curious. So what's next for Dunna? What's next for you? What do you think? Do you have any big picture ideas? Do you have any kind of like plans to I don't know, something that you don't have to share anything if you don't want to, but I'm just curious.
I'm happy to. Yeah, I basically spent the last month, I mean, for anyone who's been following, I'm not 100% sure when this is coming out, but like I basically spent the end of December and all of January without uploading anything really. With the exception of a few stories and some tweets, but no videos, no Instagram, no nothing. And I've just been spending the time kind of figuring out like, what does this look like for 2022 and kind of ongoing, but mostly just for this year. My wife and I are moving in just less than a month out to the west coast of Canada, out to Victoria. She's going back to school. And so like, there's a lot hinging around the move and us going to where YouTube is not only my income, but both of our income kind of thing. So there's been a lot of like business planning and stuff, but the main thing is to keep pushing forward. It worked for it worked for 2021 and people seem to be enjoying the content. It's getting better. I want to try and implement a little bit more. I'd love to get the live streams going again, editing people's photos, that kind of stuff. I want to do a little bit more with Instagram and Reels. So it's basically just kind of a little bit more of the same, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. I'm fiddling around with NFTs. I'm not 100% sure where that's going yet, but that's it's kind of on my play table.
I'm following closely, by the way.
I was thinking about this morning, just in case it came up in our conversation. Like, how do I feel about NFTs? Is like optimistic and skeptical. Like, I don't feel bad about them. I feel good. Like, there seems to be some cool things happening, but also like skeptical in that I'm like kind of always checking in to make sure, and I'm still doing a lot of learning and that kind of stuff. So that one's still kind of just like a little side hustle, back burner type thing that I'm not investing too much into. But yeah, lots of fresh content coming this year and lots of cool partnerships and stuff. So
how cool.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. I love to know that it sounds like your life is progressing. Congratulations on the move. Moving can
Thank
be
you.
a little not my favorite thing. Let's just put it that way.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So a lot of the things have to work around that whole process. So I imagine it could be a very challenging endeavor in the next few weeks, maybe. Dunna, thank you so much. I would love to have you back on the podcast whenever you're free. Obviously, we can plan this in the future, but where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm mostly on youtube.com/Dunna Did It, DUNNADIDIT, and then DunnaDidIt.com is kind of a central hub.
Okay.
And then Twitter and Instagram, same deal. Dunna Did It.
There you go.
I'm just Dunna Did It everywhere. It wasn't a hard username to get.
Nice and simple. It's so easy to remember.
Yeah.
And very unique.
You got it.
Yeah, it's very unique. So awesome. Thank you, Dunna. I really appreciate it. And hope you enjoy the rest of the week and good luck with the move.
Cheers. Thank you so much.